The Pacific Ocean is an entity of terrifying scale. In early 1942, it was a Japanese lake. Following the devastation at Pearl Harbor, the Imperial Japanese Navy seemed invincible. They had swept through Southeast Asia, the Philippines, and the Dutch East Indies with a speed and ferocity that left the Allied powers reeling. The United States, though wounded, was not yet defeated, but it was standing on the edge of an abyss. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, knew a fundamental truth that his superiors in Tokyo often ignored. Japan could not win a long war of attrition against American industry. His only hope was to force a decisive battle, one final cataclysmic engagement that would sink the remaining American aircraft carriers and force Washington to the negotiating table. His target was a tiny, isolated coral atoll known as Midway. To the Japanese, it was AF. To the Americans, it was the last line of defense for the west coast of the United States. While the Japanese fleet sailed under a veil of perceived secrecy, the real battle was already being fought in a windowless basement in Hawaii, known as Station Haipo. Here, a team of eccentric codebreakers, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, worked around the clock. They were listening to the heartbeat of the Imperial Navy, deciphering the complex JN-25 code. The tension in Haipo was palpable. They knew a massive operation was coming, but they needed to prove the target. Through a brilliant ruse, sending a fake unencrypted message stating Midway's saltwater evaporator had broken down. They tricked the Japanese into confirming that AF was indeed Midway. When Admiral Chester Nimitz received this intelligence, he didn't just have a hint. He had the entire Japanese order of battle. He knew the dates, the directions, and the strength of the enemy. While Yamamoto thought he was laying a trap, he was actually sailing into one. Nimitz took a calculated risk, stripping the defenses of the South Pacific to rush the carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown to a point in the ocean known as Point Luck. At 4:30 in the morning on June 4th, the air over the Japanese fleet was filled with the roar of engines. The Kidō Butai, the formidable carrier strike force, launched 108 aircraft to strike Midway Island. Among them was Lieutenant Joichi Tomonaga, a veteran pilot who led the attack with clinical precision. As the sun began to rise, the defenders of Midway braced for impact. The island was a hornet's nest. Marine pilots, flying largely obsolete Brewster Buffaloes, rose to meet the Japanese Zeros. It was a slaughter. The Japanese Zeros were faster, more agile, and flown by the most experienced naval aviators in the world. Yet, the message from Tomonaga back to the fleet was ominous. There is need for a second strike. This single sentence set off a chain of events that would lead to disaster. Aboard the flagship Akagi, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo faced a grueling choice. He had held half of his planes in reserve, armed with torpedoes just in case American ships appeared. But his scouts had found nothing. Believing the American fleet was still thousands of miles away, and hearing Tomonaga's report, Nagumo ordered a fatal change. He commanded his reserve planes to go below to the hangar decks to switch their torpedoes for land attack bombs. Then the unthinkable happened. A scout plane reported 10 ships, apparently enemy. Panic did not set in immediately, but confusion did. Nagumo halted the rearming. Then came another report. The enemy is accompanied by what appears to be a carrier. The Japanese hangars became a scene of chaotic, high-stakes labor. Ground crews worked feverishly to swap bombs back to torpedoes. Fuel lines were snaked across the decks. High explosive munitions were stacked in the aisles rather than being secured in magazines. The Kidō Butai was at its most vulnerable. Its throat was open. Before the American dive bombers arrived, the Japanese fleet had to contend with the American torpedo bombers. These men, flying the slow, vulnerable TBD Devastators, were the first to find the Japanese carriers. One by one, squadrons like Torpedo 8 from the Hornet attacked without fighter escort. They were decimated. Of the 15 planes in VT-8, not a single one returned. Ensign George Gay, the sole survivor, bobbed in the water and watched as the Japanese Zeros picked his comrades out of the sky. To a casual observer, these attacks were a failure. They scored no hits. But they served a crucial purpose. They drew the Japanese fighter cover down to sea level, leaving the skies above the carriers wide open. And they kept the Japanese flight decks busy, preventing them from launching their own counterstrike. The clouds parted. High above the Japanese fleet, at 14,000 feet, 2 squadrons of American SBD Dauntless dive bombers, led by Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey and Max Leslie, looked down. They saw the 4 carriers of the Kidō Butai carved into the blue water like white diamonds. The Japanese lookouts were focused on the horizon, watching for more torpedo planes. They never looked up. At 10:22, the screaming whine of diving planes filled the air. The Kaga was hit first. 4 bombs turned the ship into a furnace. The Akagi, Nagumo's flagship, was hit next. A single bomb from Lieutenant Commander Richard Best struck the center of the flight deck, crashing into the hangar filled with fueled B-5N Kate bombers. The secondary explosions were catastrophic. The Soryu was struck 3 times in rapid succession. Within minutes, 3 of the 4 pillars of the Japanese Empire were burning, dying hulks. In just 6 minutes, the balance of power in the world had shifted. Only the Hiryu, positioned further north, escaped the initial carnage. Under the command of the fierce Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, the Hiryu did not retreat. She struck back, Japanese pilots, showing the same samurai spirit that had defined their rise, followed the American planes back to their source. The USS Yorktown. Despite the intense anti-aircraft fire and the desperate defense by American Wildcats, the Japanese managed to hit the Yorktown with 3 bombs and 2 torpedoes. The American crew fought valiantly to save the Old Joe, as they called her, but the ship began to list heavily. It was a Pyrrhic victory for the Japanese. While the Yorktown was crippled, the Americans still had the Enterprise and the Hornet. By 5 in the evening, the Hiryu's luck ran out. Scouts from the Enterprise located her. A wave of 24 Dauntless dive bombers descended. The Hiryu put up a desperate fight, maneuvering violently, but 4 bombs struck her forward deck. The explosions were so powerful, they blew the elevator right off the ship. Admiral Yamaguchi, realizing the battle was lost and the pride of the Japanese Navy was gone, gathered his officers on the tilting deck. He ordered them to abandon ship, but announced he would stay behind. He was joined by Captain Tomeo Kaku. They shared a final cup of water, toasted the Emperor, and tied themselves to the bridge as the ship was scuttled by Japanese torpedoes to prevent her capture. As the sun set on June 4th, the horizon was lit by the orange glow of 4 dying giants. The morning of June 5th revealed the full extent of the disaster. The Japanese had lost 4 fleet carriers, a heavy cruiser, and over 250 aircraft. Most importantly, they lost their most precious resource: over 3,000 men, including their most elite, irreplaceable naval aviators and mechanics. The United States had lost the Yorktown and a destroyer, but they had gained something far more valuable: the initiative. Midway was the first time since the 19th century that the Japanese Navy had suffered a defeat of this magnitude. It was the incredible victory, a triumph of intelligence, timing, and raw courage. It proved that a democracy, though slow to wake, could outthink and outfight a militaristic empire when its people were united by a clear and desperate purpose. Today, the waters around Midway are silent, a vast blue graveyard for ships and men. But the legacy of those few hours in June 1942 continues to shape the world. The Battle of Midway was the moment the United States Navy became the primary guardian of the Pacific. It was the moment the rising sun began its slow, inevitable descent. It was a declaration that the era of the battleship was over, and the era of naval aviation had begun. Above all, Midway is a testament to the individual pilot, the codebreaker in the basement, and the sailor in the engine room. It was their refusal to give up, their precision under fire, and their willingness to sail into the unknown that changed the course of the 20th century. The Pacific was no longer a Japanese lake. It was the birthplace of a new American era, an era where the United States would not just participate in the world, but lead it. The fight was far from over, but after Midway, the road to Tokyo was finally open. This was the day the tide turned. This was the miracle at Midway.